There's a phenomenon that happens to certain women at very specific moments in their lives. You stumble upon content that feels less like a random discovery and more like an invisible hand guiding you towards something you didn't even know you were searching for. If you're watching this right now, it's because something fundamental within you has shifted, and reality is responding to that shift in ways you're only beginning to understand. This isn't coincidence. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, a concept that goes far beyond mere chance. It's the orchestration of meaningful encounters by forces operating beneath conscious awareness, connecting your inner transformation with outer reality in ways that defy logical explanation. Jung spent decades researching why certain psychological content appears to certain people at precisely the right moment. And what he discovered will change how you understand what's happening to you right now. What you're about to hear will illuminate why only some women receive this recognition at this exact point in their lives. This video will reveal the psychological and energetic thresholds you're crossing, the invisible architecture of transformation that Jung spent his life mapping, and why the most powerful phase of feminine existence often begins in silence, confusion, and a strange sense of being chosen by something larger than your individual will. Before we go deeper into Jung's map of this transformation, if you're a woman who senses you're entering a completely new phase of existence and you want to understand the real psychology behind what's happening to you, subscribe to Inner Wise Woman and hit that notification bell. Because what we're exploring here isn't surface-level spirituality or empty affirmations. This is the actual psychological mechanics of feminine power awakening. Your inner wise woman knows you need this understanding right now. At this exact moment in your life, you're standing in what Jung called a liminal space, the threshold between who you were and who you're becoming. Jung understood this as a psychological portal where your old personality structure must disintegrate before something new can emerge. You might feel it as a physical sensation, a tightness in your chest when you try to perform roles that once felt natural, or an exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. Your body knows before your mind does. It senses the incongruence between the mask you wear for the world and the truth stirring beneath it. This is what Jung called the persona, the social adaptation that becomes a prison when it no longer reflects the authentic self trying to surface. For women entering their most powerful phase, this mask doesn't just feel uncomfortable anymore. It begins to suffocate you. Every interaction where you have to pretend, every conversation where you can't speak your truth, every moment you smile when you want to scream, it all becomes unbearable. Why does this happen now and not earlier? Because the psyche has its own timeline, one that doesn't match the linear progression of calendar years. The self, that central organizing principle Jung identified as the totality of conscious and unconscious aspects of your personality, matures according to internal readiness rather than external age. Some women reach this threshold at 35, others at 55. The timing isn't arbitrary. It arrives when your unconscious has accumulated enough pressure, enough unlived life, enough suppressed truth that the container of your false self can no longer hold it. What you're experiencing is the cracking of that container. Jung spoke of symbolic death, the necessary dissolution that precedes rebirth. This isn't metaphorical comfort. It's a precise description of what happens when an outdated identity structure collapses under the weight of who you actually are. You may notice yourself withdrawing from social situations that once energized you. Conversations that seemed meaningful now feel hollow. The effort required to maintain certain relationships becomes unbearable, like carrying stones uphill with no destination in sight. This withdrawal isn't depression, though doctors might misdiagnose it as such. It's your psyche's instinctive retreat into an incubation space, a psychological womb where transformation can occur undisturbed by the demands and expectations of others. Solitude becomes not a punishment, but a requirement. You need to be alone with what's emerging, without the constant interference of other people's projections, needs, and judgments. The women who receive this recognition at this particular moment are different from those still operating within consensus reality. There's a quality of preparedness in your unconscious, an underground readiness that has been building for years without your conscious knowledge. You've been different for a long time, but you've been excellent at hiding it, even from yourself. You learned early how to camouflage your intensity, your depth, your knowing. You became skilled at making yourself palatable, acceptable, normal. Now the hiding has become more painful than the revealing. This is the mark of genuine transition. When concealment costs more than exposure, when the mask hurts more than the vulnerability of being seen, your psyche is ready to shed its protective layers. Have you felt it? That strange sensation of being selected, as though invisible forces have singled you out for a process you didn't volunteer for? This isn't grandiosity or delusion. It's the accurate perception of individuation beginning. Jung's individuation is that journey toward psychological wholeness that few people complete because it demands everything you've been using to feel safe. The collective unconscious, that shared reservoir of human experience and imagery that exists beneath personal consciousness, activates certain archetypal patterns at specific developmental moments. For women, the transition from one archetypal phase to another carries particular intensity because it involves not just personal transformation, but the awakening of ancient feminine patterns that have been dormant, sometimes for your entire life. Before emergence comes silence. Before power comes emptiness. The desert isn't the absence of life, but the hidden gestation of it. You might be in that desert right now, feeling isolated in ways you can't explain to anyone who hasn't been there. Friends ask what's wrong, and you have no answer because nothing is wrong in the conventional sense. Everything is simply different. The old motivations don't work anymore. The old rewards don't satisfy. The old version of yourself keeps trying to resurrect itself, and you keep experiencing that resurrection as a kind of death. What if the desert itself is the answer? What if this apparent emptiness is actually a womb, and you're being remade in darkness before you can emerge into a light you don't yet comprehend? This is where the somatic dimension becomes crucial. Jung recognized that the body carries knowledge the conscious mind hasn't accessed yet. Women in this transition often experience inexplicable fatigue, hormonal disruptions, sleep disturbances, or a heaviness that no medical test can explain. These aren't psychosomatic symptoms in the dismissive sense. They're your body's articulation of a truth your conscious mind is still resisting. Your physical form is rejecting the lie of the false self before your thoughts catch up. The wisdom isn't in your head. It's in your cells, in your gut, in the intelligence of your body that knows continuation on the current path means a deeper form of death than the one you're afraid of. As your tolerance for falseness decreases, your discernment becomes almost brutal. You can feel dishonesty in a room before anyone speaks. You sense the hidden agendas, the unspoken resentments, the performance of emotions that aren't genuinely felt. This isn't paranoia or judgment. It's the emergence of what Jung called the intuitive function, one of 4 primary psychological functions that, when developed, allows direct perception of underlying realities. You're reading energy now, not just words. You're perceiving essence, not just presentation. This makes most social interaction exhausting because you see how much of human communication is elaborate pretense. There's an archetypal shift occurring that Jung mapped through his study of feminine psychology. The journey from what he and later analysts called the maiden archetype to the queen or crone involves a fundamental reorganization of psychic energy. The maiden seeks approval, validation, and definition from external sources. Her power is potential. Her identity is forming. Her sense of self depends on reflection from others, particularly from men, from authority figures, from society telling her who she should be. The queen, by contrast, carries her authority within. She doesn't seek permission. She doesn't require validation. She knows who she is, because she's descended into her own depths and returned with that knowledge intact, carved into her bones. This transition isn't about age, it's about initiation. Some women remain in maiden psychology their entire lives, always seeking external confirmation, always performing for an audience, always needing someone else to tell them they matter. Others undergo the initiatory descent earlier, forced by circumstance or called by something within them that refuses to remain dormant any longer. If you're watching this, you're in that descent right now. The ground beneath your old identity has opened, and you're falling through layers of yourself you didn't know existed. This falling feels like dying because, in a sense, it is. The woman you were is dying, so the woman you actually are can finally live. The collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of inherited psychic content Jung spent his life exploring, contains the memories and patterns of all women who came before you. As you individuate, as you move toward wholeness, you begin to access this deeper stratum of experience. You might feel the presence of ancestors you never knew, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, women whose names were forgotten, but whose essence remains. They're not ghosts in the supernatural sense. They're psychological realities, patterns of feminine experience encoded in the unconscious that activate during profound transitions. Your transformation isn't just personal, it's generational. Every step you take toward authentic selfhood heals something in the lineage, forwards and backwards through time. This is the concept of transgenerational healing that emerges from Jungian thought. The wounds and complexes aren't just yours. They're inherited, passed down through family lines, encoded in patterns of relationship, expectation, and suppressed emotion. When you break a pattern, when you refuse to carry forward a dysfunction, when you choose consciousness over repetition, you're liberating not just yourself, but the entire chain of women connected to you through blood and archetype. Your mother's unlived life, your grandmother's suppressed rage, your great-grandmother's silent resignation, all of it can begin to resolve through your willingness to live differently. This is why the process feels so significant, because it is. You're not just healing yourself, you're healing the feminine line itself. But integration requires something many women have been taught to reject. It requires embracing the shadow, that Jungian concept referring to all the aspects of yourself you've deemed unacceptable and pushed into the unconscious. For women especially, the shadow often contains the very qualities that would make you powerful. Anger that could fuel necessary boundaries. Ambition that could drive real achievement. Sexual desire unlinked from relationship or romance. Selfishness, not as pathology, but as healthy self-interest. The capacity to say no without guilt. The ability to prioritize yourself without apology. The willingness to disappoint others when staying true to yourself requires it. These aren't character flaws. They're rejected powers, banished to the unconscious because they threatened your acceptability, your lovability, your safety in a world that prefers women diminished, accommodating, and small. The woman entering her power stops hiding these aspects. She integrates them, brings them into consciousness, allows them to inform her choices and shape her presence in the world. This is why powerful women frighten people, not because they're aggressive or domineering, but because they're whole. They've retrieved the parts of themselves that were exiled, and they move through the world with an authenticity that challenges everyone still performing their acceptable personas. You become a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable for people still avoiding their own reflection. One of the most significant deaths in this process is the death of the need for external validation, particularly masculine validation. Jung spoke of the father complex, the psychological patterns formed in relationship to paternal authority that, for many women, become internalized as a constant seeking of male approval. When this complex begins to dissolve, when the father's voice in your head loses its power, when you realize you've been performing for an audience of internalized masculine judgment, your entire life something fundamental shifts. The opinions of men, individually and collectively, stop mattering in the way they once did. This doesn't mean hatred or rejection. It means indifference, which is actually more radical. The freedom that comes with this shift is terrifying at first. If you're not performing for approval, who are you? If you're not shaping yourself to be loved by others, what shape do you take? The answer emerges slowly in the silence you've been afraid to enter. You discover that you have your own authority, your own internal tribunal, your own standards and values that don't require external confirmation. You become sovereign, not in the political sense, but in the psychological sense. You rule your own inner kingdom, and no one else's vote matters in your territory. Simultaneously, new realities begin appearing. Opportunities manifest without struggle. People who match your transformation show up unexpectedly. Resources become available in ways that seem too perfectly timed to be random. Jung's principle of synchronicity explains this phenomenon. When your inner and outer worlds align, when you're living from authentic center rather than false persona, reality responds with matching circumstances. This isn't magical thinking or manifestation techniques sold by the spiritual marketplace. It's the natural result of energetic coherence. When you stop broadcasting confusion, contradiction, and incongruence, reality stops reflecting those qualities back to you. Sexual energy transforms as well, though not in the way conventional thinking suggests. This isn't about seduction or attractiveness in performative terms. It's about the return of erotic power as creative life force, the principle ancient traditions understood and that Jung explored through his study of Eastern philosophy and alchemy. Sexuality in this deeper sense isn't separate from spirituality or creativity. It's the same energy, the generative force that creates reality itself. When a woman reclaims this power, not as a tool to attract or please others, but as her own divine birthright, she becomes genuinely magnetic. Not because she's trying to attract anything, but because she embodies creative potency itself. This is the difference between performing sexuality for an audience and being sexual as your essential nature, between using erotic energy as currency and being erotic energy as essence. If you've resonated with everything we've explored so far, and you're recognizing yourself in this map of transformation, subscribe to Inner Wise Woman and turn on notifications. Because we're dedicated to exploring the real depth psychology of feminine power, not surface spirituality. Your journey through this most powerful phase requires understanding, not just inspiration. The individuation process Jung mapped doesn't create something new. It reveals what was always there, buried under layers of conditioning, fear, adaptation, and false identity. The essence was never absent. It was hidden, suppressed, forgotten, but never gone. What's happening now is remembering, not becoming. You're not achieving some new state. You're returning to original nature, to the irreducible core of who you are beneath every story you've told and every role you've performed. This is the meaning of the journey home that appears in mythology across cultures. The return isn't to a place, it's to yourself. The peace that comes with this recognition is different from any happiness you've previously known. It's not dependent on circumstances. It doesn't fluctuate with external validation. It exists prior to events, beneath emotions, beyond the ups and downs of daily life. Jung identified this as the experience of the self, the deeper organizing center that remains constant, regardless of what the ego experiences. When you touch this ground, when you know yourself at this level, everything changes while nothing changes. You still have challenges, losses, difficulties, but you have a foundation that can't be shaken because it's not constructed from external materials. It simply is, and you've finally recognized it. This video found you not as a call to action, but as a confirmation of what's already occurring. The universe doesn't convince, it reflects. If this content resonates, it's because you're already on the path, already in the transition, already being remade by forces you only partially understand. What matters now is whether you'll trust the process or resist it, whether you'll allow the dissolution of the false self or try to preserve it, whether you'll step into the power that's rising within you or retreat into the safety of who you used to be. There's a responsibility that comes with awakening. You become, whether you intend to or not, a presence that catalyzes change in others. Your simple existence, your refusal to pretend, your commitment to authenticity disturbs the carefully maintained illusions of everyone around you. People who are still identified with their personas will find you uncomfortable, not because you're doing anything to them, but because your integration mirrors back their fragmentation. You become a living question. If she can stop performing, why can't I? This is the burden of consciousness. You can't unknow what you know, and your knowing affects the field around you in ways both visible and invisible. The loneliness intensifies at this stage, and it's important to understand that this is not a problem to be solved, but a feature of the terrain. True individuation, complete psychological wholeness, leaves you somewhat orphaned from collective belonging. You no longer fit in boxes, tribes, or fixed identities. You can move through different worlds, relating to various types of people, but you're not fully of any group. Jung described this as the loneliness of the individuated self, the price of consciousness.